It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege and honor to interview the USA Paralympian swimmer, Martha Ruether. How are you doing today?
I'm very good, and thank you for having me.
Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to start competing in swimming?
Yeah, so kind of the way that my swimming career began is that I grew up in a very rural town in upstate New York, or Western New York rather. Because of that, we didn't have a lot of sports options outside of, the traditional like track and soccer and basketball and all that sort of stuff. And because of my visual impairment, I couldn't do sports that involve like a ball because my visual impairment is due to my retinas. So because of that, if I get hit hard enough in the back of the head, my retina can detach and I can go fully blind. So anything with a flying object was not really for me. And so kind of based on the options that my school had, I had track and swimming, and I run like a duck. So was not for me. And I got into swimming in about fifth grade. And it was actually really funny. When I first tried out for the local club team we had, I hated it. And I was drowning in a pool full of big kids. And I cried to my mom and said I didn't want to do it. And she didn't make me. And the next year I ended up being a manager for our varsity team because our school was so small. We didn't have like modified JV varsity for swimming. It was just 6 through 12, one team as varsity. So I joined the varsity team and then did join the club team that year and then just kind of worked really hard and went from there. So I think there was a couple different avenues. There was no people, because I'm from a rural area, there was no people that were really like me. And so I didn't have a lot of role models in the disability community or anything like that. So growing up, I didn't even know about the Paralympics. I had no idea what they were, what was going on. And so I actually went to a camp for blind and visually impaired kids, and it teaches them different sports. So like goalball and baseball and like blind specific sports, as well as just Paralympic sports, judo and swimming. And so that's when I found out about swimming. And I was in 8th grade at the time. So I'd been swimming for a couple years, and they were like, hey, Martha's pretty good. She should go, try for the Paralympic Games. And that was in 2008. So, we went to a couple meets. I got classified and we didn't really know what was going on. But I did it for a couple years and then kind of fell off the Paralympic bandwagon. And was trying to figure out where I wanted to go to college and all of that stuff. So after that, I kind of got back in the swing of things in 2013 and made my first world championships, which was in Montreal. And then after that, it kind of, snowballed from there and my career took off. So long story answer to your question, but yeah.
Of course, what was it like going to Brockport to go swim in college?
Yeah, so that was a really cool experience. I was a little bit older, so my college career was a little bit more broken up than most people. I went to one school for 2 years, and then they cut their swim team. They were a Division II school in Ohio. And then I went out to the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center and trained there for 2.5 years in Colorado Springs, and then went to Rio. So my college, really the college swimming career that I kind of claim, quote unquote, is SUNY Brockport, because it was after Rio and it was just kind of where I felt the most connected to the team and the environment in the school and all of that. So just kind of getting to represent the school as well as Paralympics, just because at the time I was a Paralympian. It was a really cool experience, and it was really my teammates really accepted it and kind of rolled with it, and I was very much just treated like anybody else on the team, which is super important. And the coach at the time coached me throughout a number of Paralympic meets and things like that, and so he was super pivotal in my career. So overall, really positive experience. They were a D3 school, and I highly recommend it to anybody that wants to pursue sports in college. I think it's super important and kind of really helps you get connections and learn a bunch of different skills and all that sort of stuff. So it was a good experience.
How was that training like, preparing for the Paralympics and getting to train at the Olympic Paralympic facility?
Yeah, so that was a really cool experience. As I mentioned, I grew up very rurally, so we didn't have a lot. In terms of, if anybody knows like swimming lingo, I didn't know what paddles were until I went to college, which is odd and funny now. So, I didn't have a lot of exposure to the swimming world as a whole. And so kind of being able to be at the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center, where there's so much top of the line, right? Like everything. It was amazing. And I think I showed a lot of improvement within that 2.5 years. And I also learned a lot about myself and all that just because I was really far away from home. Being from New York and being in Colorado, it's, 2 time zones different. So I think I grew up a lot. I learned a lot about myself and just kind of the Paralympic movement in general. And I think just a lot of growth happened and it was a really cool experience.
Of course, during that time of moving and stuff, what was that like getting adjusted to living on your own and obviously becoming a professional athlete?
Yeah, so I think it was a big switch. I had been out at the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center for that summer. I believe it was summer of 2014. And at the time, I was just going to go out for the summer and then go back to college. And that's when I found out that the program that I was a part of was cut. So I could either kind of go back to college and figure it out, like find a way to train essentially, or stay at the Olympic Training Center. And the coach at the time had asked me, "Oh, you should stay, you should stay, you should stay." And I was like, I don't know. And because of that, I ended up staying. So I basically, quintessentially, and I always kind of make this joke because I technically did, dropped out of college to swim. And, that's not for everybody. And I know, some people have different paths and all that stuff. But I mean, I will say that move in particular really taught me to not plan your life so much, because I was definitely a planner at that point in my life. Like I was like, I have the next 5 years, 10 years planned. And, that in particular, that switch and that shift from I'm going to college, doing the traditional, go to high school, go to college, find a job, to I'm going to basically become a professional athlete. Like you really have to learn to fly by the seat of your pants, essentially, and just kind of figure it out. So I think that really impacted, me as a person. And I think it made me have to adjust a lot more and learn to go with the flow, which, I'm not always a go with the flow, don't get me wrong. But, I try to be, and I think it just taught me a lot about myself and it got me a lot more independence, which is super important as well.
How was that like getting your first time going internationally in 2008?
Yeah. So, and my first international meet was really important. It was in Montreal and it was a World Championships. And I'll never forget, I was walking up to the ready room and the head coach at the time was showing me and one of my teammates where to go. And he walked us up to the ready room and said, welcome to your first final. Go on in. And I remember walking in there and just being moderately intimidated by the fact that like nobody spoke English in that ready room. That was kind of weird. And just you're just like kind of scared the whole time. It was kind of I don't know if I'm going to throw up or pass out. So I think just kind of getting used to the vastness of it all, right? And of course that wears off, right? Like you go to a couple of them and you're like, all right, I've seen you a couple times, whatever. But the first time it's very like, holy crap, where am I? You are from a not even remotely a country near me. So, just kind of, I think because my career started at a Worlds, it was such an eye opener, literally, just to the fact of how vast it is and how big of a movement it really is. So I think it was really cool.
What was that like getting to compete in the Worlds in 2013?
Yeah. So the Worlds in 2013 was something where I was just kind of trying to like figure it out still. It was another really big stage and kind of being able to grasp it all. I think I kind of just swam anything from what I remember. Again, it was, almost 10 years ago, but I think I just swam whatever they put me in and like had no idea what was going on and just was trying to get through the meet and just like soak it all in. So I think it was a really cool starting point. And I met some of, my best friends there. I mean, Courtney Truitt and I was, going to be in her wedding, unfortunately, because of COVID, things changed. But, we were really important people in our lives. And I got to meet her. And she was really a mentor for me throughout my early years, just in the Paralympic movement in general. So I really valued that time we got to have together and just to meet her. And I also met Jessica Long, and she was my roommate actually at that trip. So, just kind of getting to meet them and experience everything and just take in all of the advice they had was super important.
Of course, having the 2013 and the 2008 World Championship, what was that like preparing for the 2015 World Championship?
Yeah, so I definitely think I approached the 2015 World Championships in Glasgow a lot different. I had been at the Olympic Training Center for about a year. We had had a couple coaching switches at the time, and so things were a little bit turbulent in that area, but I think I definitely walked into that World Championships a lot more confident and a lot more of a different person than I was in 2013. You start to know your competitors and you start to pay attention to what they're doing and, like their times throughout the year and all of that. So, and I think just the culture at the Olympic Training Center is so goal focused and, performance focused that like your opinion of things switches, right? It wasn't just I'm this starstruck 18-year-old that's like, what's going on? To, how old was I? 2015, I was 21. So, a little bit older, a lot more than I did, and just, figuring life out and working through it and walking in with a lot more confidence for sure. And it was actually one of my best meets to date in terms of results. And I made the national A team there, which was a pretty good accomplishment for me. So, and I was pretty excited walking away from that meet with, the times that I had and kind of overcoming some stuff. So actually one big thing about that meet, so worlds are normally a 7-day meet, and the day one was my 50 freestyle, which was my main event. And I got up on the block, and when they say take your mark, you have to be completely still. And I went down and I just twitched slightly, just a little bit. And we went off, we swam the race, it was fine. And then I got done. They give you a slip that says like you medaled, which was cool. And I got a bronze and a best time by like half a second. And it was crazy. And then come to find out I was disqualified for that little twitch. So that was a lot because the time doesn't count. I didn't get to medal. And that was on day one of a 7-day meet. So just kind of approaching that. And that was a really big change for me in terms of the way that I looked at any other meet and any kind of amount of adversity that I had about things, because just getting to just process that and know that I had more work to do the rest of the meet. And, just because this thing happened that was really upsetting doesn't mean the rest of the meet's in the trash can. So kind of just adjusting your focus and focusing on time goals and things like that was just the way that I approached it. And I think that really did change a lot of things for my career.
Of course, after that moment that you said that you got disqualified, how did you change your momentum to prepare you for the next meet that happened in that same day?
Yeah, so I think it was really just kind of course, there was tears and there was processing and all of that stuff, and it was hard. But I think just kind of focusing on the things that we worked on technique-wise, preparing for those races, and knowing that, this was my main shot to medal, but there are other things I need to do. So kind of just shifting my focus and being like, all right, you can feel bad about this for like a couple hours. And another thing that actually kind of helped as well is we have this rule on national team where we call it the 5-minute rule, where you get to be openly upset about your race for about 5 minutes. And then after that, you got to put it away because you don't spread it to the rest of the team. And, you need to be a team player and you need to kind of just figure it out and be able to be there for your teammates. So I think it was something where, I had time to process it for a little bit. And then I just kind of needed to understand there was more work to do and I was there to do more than just one race. So.
Of course, how is it like preparing for not just one meet in that world championship, but multiple meets throughout that world championship experiences?
Yeah, so I think going into it, it's kind of just a bigger scale of a smaller meet, right? So a lot of our national meets, I would swim the same events. So it was just kind of preparing them, but day to day and a longer span. So kind of working on recovery and working on, your sleep and the longevity of getting through a meet that's 7 days long versus something that's 3 days or a 1 day. So just kind of the mental preparation of that and knowing, okay, so you have a day off after the 100 breaststrokes, so you need to do an ice bath and stuff like that. So just kind of preparing in numerous ways and just kind of going from there.
How is that like competing in the 2019 World Championship?
Yeah, so that was very different for me. I was no longer at the Olympic Training Center. I had Rio under my belt, but I was, 2019. I was actually just going to grad school right after that. So I like to throw transitions in at big important times. And so at that meet, I was under a different coach at the time. Her name is Peggy Ewald. She's one of the national team coaches. And she had shifted a lot of my perspective about my stroke and the way to approach technique and all of that stuff. So again, more transitions. And I think just going into it, it was a good meet, but it was a lot of change going on in my life outside of swimming. So I think I did put up a pretty decent time in the 50 free, for me anyway. Didn't medal. It was close. I got 4th in the 50. But I think the biggest thing for me that was my takeaway from that is I felt, the further I got in my career, the more of a veteran, right, I felt. So and I always was kind of one of the people that liked to try and help out the younger ones, like mentor them. And if they had any questions, they could come to me and stuff like that. So kind of being able to be there and kind of guide some of those younger ones that had never been to a meet before. And not to mention, I think just kind of soaking in the venue, because we were at the London 2012 Olympic pool, and I'd never swam there before. So kind of just like soaking that in and understanding, the amount of amazing feats that had been done there, and I got to swim there. How cool is that, So just kind of soaking in the environment and being there for my team, as well as just, I really, at the end of my career, the last couple of years, I really just tried to take some of the stress off, because I was somebody that put a lot of pressure on myself in terms of performance and things like that. And I think I really, in the last couple of years, tried to focus on, executing technique and kind of bringing it back to more things that I could control. So that was my main focus of that meet, was to just kind of execute some things and be there for my team.
What was that like preparing for the Paralympics in 2016 going to Rio?
Yeah, so that was kind of a whirlwind for sure. I think you're never really fully prepared for the whole emotional roller coaster that is a trials meet. I think Tokyo was different because I was older and I knew that I was toward the end of my career, versus Rio. It felt like that was the end all be all for me. So I put a lot of stress and pressure on myself, and kind of going into it. I swam well. I don't think I got any best times. I don't quite remember, but I think just kind of processing it all, and it was a learning experience essentially for me, where I kind of moving forward learned the world's not going to end if you don't make a games. And as important as making a games is for somebody that's going on that track, I think taking some of that weight off was vital in success, because you can't, swim with a piano on your back. So, just trying to take some stress off and learn from that, and understand that, it's just another swim meet, and to approach it just like every other swim meet. So a lot of learning that was done.
How was that like competing in the breaststroke in the 2016 Rio Paralympics?
Yeah. So it's actually really funny. I always say that I don't know how I ended up in that final, because my main event was the 50 freestyle. And because of that, I focused on my other events, but not as much. It was towards the end of the meet, and games is 10 days. And I'm not sure which day it was, but it was towards the end. And I had done the 50 free, and actually it was not a very good swim for me at all. I don't think I even made finals, and it was really disappointing. But again, it was kind of the same concept as 2015, where you have a bad race, you got to move on. So I was just kind of like absorbing it all, and just kind of in the environment, and was like, I don't know how I got here, but I'm here. Cool. So, I remember the race pretty vividly. I've seen it a lot in terms of like footage and stuff, but it was a really cool experience just to be able to walk out in, the podium gear. And I was the first one to walk out because of the way they organized the lanes, because I was lane 8, and I was like, don't fall. Didn't, which is good. But I think definitely just trying to just absorb it all and have fun with it, because I think that was super important. Like I said before, just, the environment was put a lot of pressure on yourself. So I really just wanted to have fun with it.
Of course, in the 2016 Paralympics for Rio, what was that like getting to compete alongside your teammates, Jessica Long and Courtney Trotter?
Yeah, so it was a really cool experience. I actually was in the same suite as Jessica Long. So we got to kind of chat after the days of events and stuff like that, though I think she competed every day in Rio, or almost. So you didn't see her very much. She was either swimming or sleeping. But it was nice to kind of, utilize their experience. I mean, Courtney had been to Beijing and London and, now Rio. So it was her third games. And again, in the similar vein, that she was a really big mentor for me. So just kind of utilizing her experience and leaning on her in such a, high stress, high emotion type of environment like a games was really important. And I think just utilizing all of their knowledge and their experience was the way to go.
Of course, in those 4 years preparing after the Rio, what was that preparation like to prepare for the Tokyo Paralympics?
Yeah, so I think, throwing COVID smack dab in the middle of that was a little challenging, especially because I had always planned to retire after Tokyo. So, throwing a 5th year into that quad was emotionally challenging, right? Like, I had gotten to a point where I was fairly burnt out on swimming, right? And everybody does. You take a little bit of a break, you come back. And I think I was to the point where I really needed to make some shifts in my training, because I wasn't really performing the way I wanted to, because I really wasn't mentally wanting to be there. So in 2021, I made some shifts in coaching and in training styles and things like that, leading up into Tokyo, just to really try and, have that last push be fun and enjoy what I did and feel supported and all of that stuff with the people around me, which everybody had been the whole time, which is, I'm really fortunate in the fact that I've had a lot of, supportive coaches and family and all of that stuff, but just trying to enjoy it a little bit more and like what I did. And I think preparing for that and really just taking it day by day was really important for me in terms of moving forward for Tokyo. So I think I also went into it with a different headspace. So like I said earlier about the 2016 trials and games and all of that, where I put a lot of pressure on myself, this time I was like, well, I think we're just going to go to the meet and see what happens and try our best, and whatever happens, happens. And that's kind of the way I felt about Tokyo too. And I also was in a suite with a couple younger athletes, Anastasia Pagonis and Gia Pergolini, who both were very successful in Tokyo. And I kind of always tried to help them out and, talk them through things before races that night before, and just how they were feeling about things and all of that stuff. So I think just trying to basically be the Courtney Truitt, I almost called her Courtney Jordan, the Courtney Truitt for them. So just to be a mentor for the younger athletes and be a good teammate. I think that was big for me in the end. I really just wanted to be able to support my team.
Of course, going into that 2020 Paralympics, did you know at that point that you were going to retire?
Yes. Yeah, I did know. And I knew kind of the time frame of when I wanted to announce it and all of that stuff. So I announced it in January after the games. And I think I was just in a period of my life where swimming was becoming lower and lower on the list of things priority wise. And I still love it. And I think it's such a wonderful sport for so many different reasons, both able-bodied and disabled people. For able-bodied and disabled people. But I think it was just something for me where that season in my life was ending, and totally fine with that. I actually coached for the next year and a half after I retired at a Division II college team where I was getting my master's called Malone University. It's in Ohio. And kind of getting to work in the swimming realm still while I was retiring was kind of nice, because I was still connected to the sport and I could still utilize everything I'd learned from, being an athlete for the length of time I was and working with all the different national team coaches to help a college team was just really rewarding. And I think now just kind of processing it all and shifting to a more like 9-to-5 traditional type job thing where I'm not really involved in sports as much in this season of my life. It's different for sure, but kind of getting used to it and, enjoying a little bit more free time.
How was that like, and what were some of your memories and moments in this previous Paralympics that you competed in?
Yeah, so I think the couple of moments that stand out aren't really big moments. They're more spending time with my teammates and just kind of getting to enjoy each other's company. And we only see each other a handful of times a year. So catching up on life and just, enjoying each other's time and kind of taking in the downtime that we had, because you're in such a high emotional state the whole time. So just trying to spend time together and, laugh and joke about stuff and just have a good time with your team, I think is super important. And the food was pretty good in Tokyo. So
how was it like, obviously competing alongside Jessica Long and Courtney Truitt?
Yeah, so I didn't particularly compete against them in terms of we weren't in the same class, but I think getting to watch them compete, I think you learn a lot from both watching people that compete in different classes and how they do things and just their expertise and how they go about approaching different races and things like that. And Jessica and Courtney also approach races very differently. So it's just really cool to see their difference in, the way that they approach races and the way that they approach, their competitors and things like that. So Jessica's a little bit more intense. Courtney's a little bit more smiley. So, it's whatever works for you.
Of course, how is that like competing against teams like Canada, Mexico, and Brazil?
Yeah, it was really cool. And actually, so one of my favorite memories from Rio that you just reminded me of was I was in the stands, and the way that the Rio pool was set up, it was kind of like an arena setting where the pool was lower to the stands, and the stands were raised up, and they were all the way around the pool. And I don't remember the event or whatever class it was or anything about it, but I remember that somebody from Brazil had won. And obviously we had spectators because it was pre-COVID. So I think the most people that were there was like 50 to 60,000 people in the stands, something astronomical, right? A ton of people in the stands. And they played Brazil's national anthem, and to hear thousands of people sing the same anthem at once is like a really cool feeling. So I think just kind of being able to be there for that. And it makes me really excited for LA in 2028 because, America, we like to go hard. So I think it'll be really cool to watch. I definitely want to go spectate LA and be able to support my teammates that are still in and see some newbies that come in and, the future of the Paralympic movement and all of that. So I think just kind of being able to see the way that we approach it as America will be really cool.
Of course, what was that feeling like receiving your Paralympic ring and having the American flag and the Argent's rings on it?
Yeah, so kind of being able to see the rings, it was a really cool experience. It was something where, I knew of a teammate of mine who'd been to 5 games. So he had 5 rings, and it was just a really cool thing. I don't wear it just because it's pretty special. So it sits in the box. But I think it's a really cool souvenir to have, as well as actually they give us a yearbook, and it's probably this thick. And it's got both the Olympic and the Paralympics, and they summarize it. And then they have pages of headshots from everybody from the teams. And that's a really cool souvenir too, just because Michael Phelps, it was his last games. So, and he's in that book. So it's kind of cool to be in the same book as Michael Phelps, you know, and that it's his last games. I think that's a pretty cool souvenir that we kind of show people sometimes too. So more of a coffee table book, but it's quite large.
What was that experience like, getting to meet those athletes, that Paralympics and Olympians that you may have looked up to?
Yeah, I think it was a really cool experience and really humanizing too. One of the people that comes to mind the most would be Allison Schmidt and Michael Phelps, which, you know, pretty well known Olympians. Um, and Allison I met on a more personal level because one of my teammates swam with her in college. So we kind of knew each other in a more casual sense. Whereas Michael, I kind of just saw in passing a couple times. But it was just kind of cool to talk to them and understand that, you know, they're just people and they just swim a lot, you know, like us. And I think just kind of understanding the fact that just because they're able-bodied and they swim faster than us doesn't mean there's a difference in intensity or in level of any sort. So I think just kind of meeting them and seeing them more on a casual, like normal level when they would come out and train at the Olympic Training Center, really brought perspective in the fact that, you know, we compete on the same stage and we are equal to the Olympians. And I think, you know, I think we're getting there with the Paralympic movement in the United States, but I think we still have some growing to do in terms of the equality.
What was that experience like, getting to meet your fans and having them ask for your autographs and photos of you?
Yeah, so that's always a really cool experience. For me, I really value it with the younger ones, so like littles. Whenever we do what we call emerging meets, so there's smaller meets in certain places in the country, and a lot of the time it's where the newbies, like really newbies, come in. And like I've seen an 8-year-old swim at a Paralympic meet, and that's so cool, right? Like I didn't have people to look up to in a swimming capacity or in a disabled capacity at 8 years old. So being able to be there and be that for them is so important. And I think just being able to foster their drive for the Paralympics, you know, just can really be something that's super important, both for the Paralympic movement on the US side, as well as just globally. I think being able to be that for them has been a really big honor and a blessing throughout the experience.
How's it like, obviously standing next to the Paralympic rings and putting them on and knowing that all of your hard work paid off?
Yeah, I think being able to represent the United States and kind of, you know, put on the stars and stripes was such a really cool feeling. And it gave me a lot of sense of pride, especially, you know, when there's a lot of things going on in the world, especially for Tokyo, when there was COVID and everything else. I think being able to step up there and say that I'm swim for the United States of America was a really proud feeling for sure.
What are some of your future plans moving forward now that you've retired?
Yeah, so right now, as I said before, and kind of the track record of my life, right, I've learned not to plan things. So right now, I am working as an admissions counselor at a college in Buffalo, New York, and it's an online. I work in the online division, though they have traditional in-person admissions, and I really enjoy it. I think I did a lot of recruiting in my time as a graduate assistant coaching for that Division II college team in Ohio. So I kind of got to transport those skills from the recruiting side to admissions, and kind of utilize, you know, my knowledge of the way that the admissions process works and all of that. So I'm really enjoying that, and just kind of get to, you know, find new hobbies and explore the city that I just moved to. I moved here in June, so kind of explore the city and meet new people and just kind of have a little bit more of a normal life is refreshing. So
what advice would you give those future people that are in college that are looking to compete in swimming?
yeah, I think it's the advice I would give would be to kind of just focus on your goals and to go for it. I mean, there's no limitations in what you can do. And I think being able to kind of, you know, relate to people that have, you know, achieved the things you've achieved is super important, and look at kind of the way that they did it, and don't necessarily, you know, copy it word for word, but I think utilizing that as a guideline is super important, and just go for your dreams. I think no matter what you're trying to achieve, whether it, you know, is academic or swimming or anything like that, I think just being able to kind of utilize that drive and that passion for something is super important. So go for it.
What advice would you give those college athletes looking to compete in professional swimming?
Yeah, so I think the advice I would give would be to really just focus on the way that you want to approach it. I think there's a couple different ways. Whereas, you know, if you want to kind of keep that fun alive, I think that's the way to approach it. Like I said earlier, is at the beginning of my time, I really put a lot of pressure on myself and was, you know, win, win, win. And I think that's a way for some people for sure. And if that's you, go for it, do it. But for me, I had a lot more fun when I just wanted to go out and swim and do what I could, and, you know, just enjoy my teammates and enjoy the whole experience. And I think just soak it in. I think, you know, it's not a lifelong career for many. So I think just kind of being able to enjoy the whole experience and just, live in the moment, I think is super important.
What advice would you give those para swimmers looking to compete in the Paralympics for the first time?
Yeah, I think that holds a special place in my heart just because, like, thinking back to my experience, I had such great mentors. And I think just finding somebody that either is a parallel, so like a friend, or somebody that's a veteran that you can, look up to and get advice from and stuff like that, I think is super important because just kind of firsthand experience with anything is vital. And I think just kind of having that person with you and kind of being able to, go through the whole process and just take it day by day, I think would be the next thing, really. And just kind of remember that the goal you're going towards is so big. And just when you get there, just enjoy it and drink it all in.
What advice would you give those Paralympians and Olympians competing for the first time and even multiple times?
Yeah, I think the advice that I would say would mainly just be to live in the moment and to not worry about results so much. I know we got very medal focused, of course, right? That's the goal. But also, I think enjoying the experience and getting to kind of, utilize the whole Olympic and Paralympic experience. And it's the village and the venues and the other teams from the other sports. I think just kind of absorbing it all and living in the moment versus just being so worried all the time about how you're going to do in your races and your competitors and all of that stuff, which you can. I mean, if that works for you, you do you. But like my advice would be just to enjoy the experience and revel in it a little bit.
What advice would you give those Olympians and Paralympians such as yourself that have gone through the retirement phase and transitioning from the sport that they love to outside of the sport?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I've learned, I don't think I'm in a direct position to give straight up advice because I'm still learning it. But I think the main thing that I've noticed is that throwing yourself in something else is helpful because you have something else to focus on and something else to do rather than like, oh, this 4 hours of my day is now empty and I have nothing to fill it because this is when I would be swimming. So I think just kind of finding out who you are outside of swimming is important and just finding different hobbies and spending more time with family and friends. And I think just valuing other things and finding, different paths in life, I think can be really useful in the adjustment period because it is an adjustment, right?
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
Yeah. So my main social media is Instagram and it's Martha Marie R.
Thank you again, Martha Marie, for your interview and best of luck in your future as you begin this journey outside of being a Paralympian swimmer.
Thank you for having me. I really have enjoyed it.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Martha Marie, for your interview and best of luck in your future.
Thank you so much.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.